I'm totally springing this on Kenny. But I want to talk about living in base housing versus not in Hawaii. You haven't lived on base here. Correct. However, full military career as a, military family. You've lived on base prior. Mm-hmm. I've lived in military housing prior. And you purchased at your last duty station, purchased at this one.
Correct.
So you actually live right over here. Should people buy? Should they not? I know when we talk about the finances of whether someone should buy, usually it works out, whether 3-year tour, 4-year tour, 5-year tour, 3-year with an extension. Mm-hmm. Typically, it's a profitable endeavor. It's a lot more nuanced than that. We're not going to unpack every mathematical angle. But you can give the experience of a military family who's like, I don't know, my kids might not fit in. We feel safe on housing. We've always lived on base housing. People do 20, 30 years, never buy a house, right? Yeah. So that perspective, you can talk about your decision. So let's start with that. Why did you guys choose to not live in base housing? Because you could potentially get a lot more for your money with your BH. Just go to a big, nice, especially your wife's an officer.
Yep. We probably would be in a bigger home with a smaller yard. Our utilities are included in what we give back to the government. So there's some perks to it. The community is generally a very good one, a tight-knit. You take care of your neighbor, know your neighbor. Friends play, kids in the street or at the pool or whatever. And the base housing here, as I understand it, is good base housing.
As long as you're not drinking fuel or...
There's that. The reason we bought here instead of being on base housing was very, very specifically, we saw the investment that was going to exceed our ability to save.
So you had already, and you were buying during COVID, so unsure time, but you had already purchased, owned, and profited.
Correct.
So the opportunity, I'm trying to think of a better analogy. You're like a dog who had already tasted blood.
Right.
You had for that appreciation, that profit, you had a taste for it already.
Here's a treat, or here's a regular bowl of dog food.
Yeah.
We tasted the treats.
Yeah.
So we want that. We're not gonna eat this unless we have to.
Okay.
And we saw the opportunity. We did well with our last purchase in LA. We didn't crush it by any means, but we had enough to put a good down payment on a VA loan, which made us a little bit stronger than the multiple offers that were coming through when we were buying at that super high peak of COVID. Base housing in general, the goods that I think come along with it are some that you touched on, like it's an island out in the middle of nowhere. It's a whole new environment. It's a whole new, there's cultural things. Are the kids going to blend in? How are they going to immerse? Being in base housing kind of maybe insulates you a little bit.
Spouse has to deploy.
Potentially.
In your case, wife, but a lot of people's husbands
right.
have to deploy, and now I have no one, and I have a 9-month-old and a 5-year-old. Yeah. That community support system.
That tight-knit community could definitely be helpful. I generally would recommend to be on base rather than rent out in the market. Giving it to a landlord versus giving it to the government, you're just going to get more home if you're eligible for base housing. You're going to get more home here than elsewhere.
In Oklahoma, I might choose to rent on the economy rather than live in whatever base housing they have.
The housing that we lived in before moving to LA and buying for our first time as a couple, we had both bought individually before we got married. So we had a little bit of a taste of home ownership and the difference. In Chicago, north of Chicago, we were a detachment from Great Lakes Navy Base. That housing, we had great friends, great neighbors, great place to walk the dog, very small little backyard patio situation, but we had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Yeah. At that time, we had no kids. We got pregnant. Connor was born there. Okay. We enjoyed it. I'm not anti-base housing, except for now knowing what I know and tasting the treats. It's basic dog food.
Yeah, right? Actually, I could see, just knowing your family, I could see you guys thriving in base housing, actually.
No qualms whatsoever.
I'm different. We grew to not like it really quick. However, caveat to that. So let's define a few things. I was active duty for 6 years, reserve all the way up until my 17th and a half year, then got out. I lived in base housing for like 15 months or maybe less. And it wasn't even on base. So the Coast Guard base in Alameda, California, if something were here in Kapolei or Eva at the mouth of Barbers, it's like, it used to be Navy housing and now it's not.
Okay.
But now there's no base anymore. We lived in this housing that was a military housing. I hated seeing everyone with a buzz cut. Hey, I can't grow hair, so okay, don't give me a... cut me some slack. But everyone's shaved head or crew cut. Everyone wearing the same Hurley Quicksilver t-shirt they got from the exchange. Like I saw that on the rack when I went to buy my Cliff Bar today kind of situation. It was just coming home to work. Everything was painted in the same color as your office. I grew to not like it really quickly.
Sure.
But being from Hawaii, there were these, right across from us, these people from Guam moved in. So I remember I met these Chamorros, and we all became like this crazy island family, and that probably doesn't happen if we don't live on base housing. So I got my version of the community thing, but when I go to a housing now, I just don't want to live there. I don't want my neighbor to be, have rank, or me to have rank over them. I hate that stuff.
True.
But you guys could thrive there. Whole point I'm making is, I could see you guys thriving well there. One's not better than the other. It just shows we have different perspectives. I would try to avoid base housing at all costs unless there was something like dogs and or multiple kids where I need that big house. If I was just my wife and I here, I'd go rent a condo in Kailua or in town or something, and I were younger. That's how that would go. You guys didn't have to live here, but there was no way you weren't going to invest again.
Right. The house chose us. Christina fell in love with the house.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was a playground right there, just outside the front door, and the pool area, and even so much that she kind of turned the blind eye to the commute from Eva all the way to Shafter.
I was going to bring that up. She had to choose to put herself in another 45 minutes of traffic, or maybe even more sometimes.
An hour.
Hour?
Yeah, it's an hour to Shafter.
Well, it's an hour to Shafter, but if she were living in, say, AMR, there would have been a 10, 15-minute commute.
Right.
So she increased by about 45 minutes to make this play.
Yeah.
For 4 years, 3 years?
Well,
maybe more because she's taking a GS job?
Yeah, we're retiring, we're staying. But the initial decision was for 3 years.
Yeah.
And in 2 years, we'll know more about what that next move looks like or not. She was just like, hey, I'm used to 45 to an hour anyway. That's what we were doing in LA. So our perspective has been a blessing in disguise, right? Like some people will be coming from the middle America and they're 10 minutes from work, or they're living on base, so they have no commute, and now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's 45 minutes to get to post. We were lucky enough to where she basically just rinsed and repeated rather than having some egregiously longer commute where she was going to be hours in the car away from the family that she's not used to.
When we were in Colorado Springs, I think that's Fort Carson. Mm-hmm. We had to go on base because my wife had to get a security clearance because she took a GS job too. We had to do it on our vacation. Thanks, Army. But anyways, that base is so big. If you're in some of these middle America bases and you live, say, off base, renting, your commute to the base might be 10 or 15 minutes, but then another 15 minutes to get to where you're going.
Yeah.
Our bases don't tend to be that big. Although Pearl Harbor's a big base, Hickham's big, but it's not like Fort Carson big where you're another 15, 20 minutes just to get where you're going.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a relevant point for some people PCSing.
I think of SeaTac and Joint Base Lewis McCord up in Washington. It basically is the entire geography between Tacoma and South Seattle. So they call it SeaTac. It's a huge joint base, just like Pearl Harbor Hickam.
Yeah,
but it's Army and Air Force. So it's more like Schofield and Wheeler in that regard, but the amount of space that it takes up
is huge.
Yeah, you go across the Columbia River into southern Washington and you run into SeaTac, and it takes 30 minutes to drive through SeaTac.
So admittedly, I'm trying to defend buying a little bit because we have an incentive to buy. For you to buy, it's one thing, but also it typically is the better decision. You typically gonna have your BH go to something that produces tens of thousands, if not six figures for you over time, or more if you keep it, versus living on base where it's comfortable. I did that. I joined the Coast Guard 21, turned 22 in boot camp. We got married when we were 23, and by 24 we were living in that housing. By 25 we got out of it, something like that. So although I got out of housing, I still did not buy real estate for another decade or more. Yeah, for another, I was 35. Yeah. Now, since 35, or I was 36, I think, I've bought multiple homes. However, I think about the timing the market that I was trying to do, saving and timing, versus time in the market.
Yeah. Right.
Time in the market, I was in California 2008, 9, 10, homes were on clearance. You ever go to Ross and there's like shoes for $3.99?
Yeah, red tag sales event.
That was houses in California. That was
Yeah.
real estate in California, and I was so Dave Ramsey. I was so conservative in my debt aversion, my aversion to leverage and debt.
Save,
I was like,
save,
I'll never
save.
buy until I save up. I realized I could not outsave the market. Now Kenji could cue my river analogy, where I'm actually standing in base housing. The river's flowing, the river's running. Saving and renting because it's cheaper, I get it, I did it for years, but that's like running next to the river. I might even be able to outpace it for a while, but I'm gonna burn out. I can't do it forever. Something's gonna happen. I'm gonna need to take a trip. Dad's gonna need a new hip. I'm gonna need a new vehicle. I just can't save and live that boring and mundane of a life for long enough without building wealth. Whatever happens, that savings rate is gonna get attacked. Wouldn't it be much easier if you jump in the river and let its momentum take you? Now, if you wanna save, pick up a side hustle, work an extra job. That's like rowing and outpacing the river. Now I'm going faster than the river. You have to get in the housing market eventually. You really do. Back to the oversimplified point. It can't run along the river forever. You can't outsave the market. The investment opportunity was obvious.
Yeah.
How has it been living on the economy versus housing? Although you haven't lived in AMR, on Schofield, etc., you know what it would be like. Kenny and his family would know exactly how that goes.
Yeah. And
how is it different here? You're in the most Hawaii community.
Yeah, I feel
Ocean
like
Point's a certain thing.
I feel like Kamakana, Ocean Point, Ho'akale in general, man, this is going to be a weird answer. It's elevated base housing. And I'm not trying to be clickbait or too exaggerated, but
This is
there's
officer housing, yeah.
way more military families renting in this area from other military families that bought and then moved back to mainland and kept to rent out.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Been anywhere on the island.
75% of the people that live in here, somebody is in the military, whether it's auntie, uncle, grandpa, the owner, the renter, the spouse, or dual military.
That much.
Almost everybody that I know in the area is military, or they transplanted, they stayed here, they were on base for a while, they bought, and then they sold and bought here in 08, 09,
Throw in
10.
veterans.
Veterans, retirees, all of that. Like everybody around me other than two really cool neighbors, one original Hawaiian family, they've got a home on Maui, they've got a home in Kauai, and they've got two here. And then one other family that's firefighter, local.
You have now, at this point, sold homes and shown homes in every neighborhood. I'll give Kenny a little crap. Kenny came to our team and our brokerage through this YouTube channel. He said, I'm becoming a real estate agent. Do you want to join? Or I want to join you guys, whatever. Kenny didn't use us as an agent. How's that? Kenny and his wife used someone else, but anyways, that's
happy wife, happy life. I'm just gonna leave it there.
Well, she didn't know us back then.
Yeah, she didn't even know that I was watching the channel. So I was household 6 at that point. When we were told we were moving here, I wasn't working.
COVID. So you do all this research.
Yeah, and so I was getting the house ready, like trying to downsize, figuring out where to go. So I like you guys, would YouTube it, and here's Moving Hawaii. And I actually just didn't even really know you were a realtor.
What, was Mahe on the channel back then?
No.
Oh,
no,
was
it was
Mahe?
super early, like the original Eva Beach driving with the dash cam kind. Very early. So my wife,
she got connected with some people.
Facebook spouse's page or something like that, and connected with somebody that she liked, and we had a good transaction.
I'm just giving Kenny credit.
I'm confessing that yes, I should have asked Derek that question. So
no,
please,
but back to living on base versus whether it was here in Eva Beach, which is like glorified officer housing, or whether it was Kaneohe, like town, Mililani, North Shore, like what a life in a 4 years plus could look like. Being on base or military housing versus not. How's that different?
Just experiencing the island for all of the melting pot that it is.
Yeah.
And one of our first concerns was how are the boys going to immerse, and it was instant. Whether that's because they had already moved a time or two, or at least Connor had moved a time or two. They were already kind of in the daycare scene in LA, and so getting them into a daycare here, they were already used to seeing different kinds of kids from different backgrounds and everything. So that part of it, I could see living on base being more insulated. And like it's just you've got military buddies, and you go to the on-base daycare, and it's all the same. The homogeny is not just every house looks the same, and here's your enlisted quarters, and then here's your officer housing, and one's on this side of the housing area and one's on the other. You have the opportunity to meet different people, understand the culture better. The business side of it is more obvious. Just the opportunity to keep the tax-free money and use it wisely towards building wealth for the family and the equity and the appreciation play versus maybe being able to save.
Ain't nobody saving in housing.
Yeah, they're taking all your BAH. It's not like you get to keep a chunk of that. You get a little bit of COLA, and saving is hard to do. Just innately, if you're not spending it, you're going to find something else to do with it.
You spoke about your kids. They go to a super local school.
Yeah.
If we're being real, my wife wouldn't move to a place where our kids go to their kids' school. That's my wife. But you guys, you guys are having a good experience as a family and your kids.
I challenge you a little bit that it's not as local as you think. I'm
wait.
Like when you were.
I want to clarify. I'm not anti-local.
No.
You know what I mean?
No,
I just want to clarify or start that over. Like my wife just wouldn't choose to live here.
I totally understand why, and don't disagree with any of Chapter 1 and the reviews, how it grades, the things that we want all of our clients to do their due diligence on. We're willing to kind of walk that line and talk more freely about it than maybe some others. We're having a good experience. We have a great teacher, plenty of friends. We've gone to multiple birthday parties and met up and had play dates. He's in kindergarten, man. It's not, education is not way up here. It's just connecting. Yes, we want him to learn. He's doing well with math. He's doing well with reading. He knows how to write his name and can do, write words. He's reading 20 minutes a night. There's nothing about that school with an immediate, direct experience of it that's given us any hesitation to just continue on and have our younger son go straight in, and we're happy. Next year, let's check back in. Because the first grade teacher might not be as good as the kindergarten teacher. We don't know.
Well, that's happening. We've had different levels of teacher at our school too. Okay, let's talk about the money then.
Yeah.
You guys made some money, 6 figures in LA, owning your house for 3 years.
Yep.
Here in Hawaii, you bought in 2021?
April of 2021, moved in June.
So right mid of that COVID boom. Point is, some of that COVID boom had expired. It wasn't like you bought at the bottom of the COVID boom, which is like May or June of 2020.
Right.
You bought after it had run its course a little bit, but still you guys are better off for having bought. Your home, how much you buy it for?
100 over.
I don't want to get into the 100 over because back in COVID, you had to shoot in front of the deer. If it's $1 million house, offer $1,050,000, and then you'd hit the target, and then you wait, and it'd be worth 1.1. That's how that market went. But you closed at what price?
125.
125.
Yep.
You sell it today, what would it be worth?
135-ish. Kind of.
Having caught a downturn too. 135.
Yeah, at a peak in the end of 2021, early 2022, 1.4-ish and a quarter. Yeah. A little bit up and down, but we're still about 100 in the good.
Okay.
After going 100 over and taking that risk and going through that sort of high point in the market.
Gotcha.
So the risk has already rewarded us, and we don't see it changing, and other than just getting better over time. And we are staying now, so it's a longer play than we would have expected, which is only going to help.
What should people know? PCS'ing families know.
If your initial thought process is, man, it's just too expensive to buy in Hawaii, that might be the case. Depends, like size of family.
You need 4 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And you have $3,600 a month in BAH or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a rough proposition. Doesn't always happen.
Yeah, just ask the questions. Like we're here to give you the real, honest nuances to understand. Here's what you could save. Here's what it looks like to rent that type of property versus buying something similar. You can't run down that river and keep up with the flow. It's inherently too difficult to save at that kind of a high discipline rate to match up to the 3 to 5% appreciation year over year, and you get to experience so much more rather than living where you work. Like I see that being the thing that got you and Michelle away from it. It was just like you felt like you were coming home to work.
Coming home to work. The whole military experience is comfortable. From being an E3 to being an E7 to being an O3 and an O5, like it's all a comfort thing, because as hard as you work and as much risk as you take, in the free market you can make different kinds of money and build different kind of wealth. Military experience has a lot of comforts and literal entitlements built in. You can live in both worlds and live in the capitalistic world and buy homes everywhere you go and retire differently. There's a guy at our last brokerage, not the most crazy savvy, on things, but he simply bought a house, PCS, refinance. Bought a house, PCS, refi. Became a GS employee for another 20 years. Bought a house, PCS, refi. Was worth 5-6 million a few years ago. Didn't do anything crazy.
Yeah.
Bought homes and waited.
Yep.
And so that's the opportunity that you have. Here's the thing, I don't think this video is going to change a lot of people's minds, but I think it'll invite some people to consider things differently. If I had bought when I was an E4, and then if I knew all I know now and bought 1 or 2 or 3 in that time and refied and repositioned and sold, I would just be better off financially.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have regrets. It's hard for me to say that. I try not to have regrets because we are, I may not have all this passion if I were so financially secure from earlier decisions.
Yeah.
But you got to consider buying. So I feel like Kenji can edit this one and put our river analogy in the middle and close this with our river analogy again. Yeah. And consider not living in housing, even if it isn't this duty station. Or you don't even know if you're getting orders to Hawaii yet. You might get orders somewhere else. Consider buying there. Consider it. Strongly consider
definitely not a Hawaii specific topic, but we should have bought in New Orleans. We probably still would not have bought in Chicago because of where the base was and what that
some bases are like that.
What that whole market looked like. The reason I tend to lean towards base housing versus renting, we were in a very small 2-bedroom, 1-bath kind of converted income property for the same amount of rent as we got a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2-car garage house on base.
Yeah.
Duh.
It's expensive to live and buy a house here, but would you rather have this $800,000, garden fruiting over the next 10 years and then rent in Oklahoma or Texas? Or would you rather rent here and then go buy your $200,000 place in Georgia or whatever in Alabama? You might end up buying the nicer house in Alabama, but when you're 50 years old, which one will have built your wealth more? It's buying the one here.
Yep.
Also, if you need 20% for a down payment in Daphne, Alabama, you could Uber quite a bit and DoorDash and save up $30,000. My point being is VA loan in Hawaii, conventional loan in Alabama.
Yeah.
So now you have 2 houses, you use the conventional loan on the cheap one.
Correct.
Your VA loan might be locked into this one. This is a good place for your VA loan to be locked into.
So, because 20% down here is not a walk in the park. We only did what we did because of the proceeds of the first VA purchase in LA and how well that did. Then we had that chunk.
Most people are never going to get to 20. Even local people, most people are just never going to get to 20% down.
My last word on it would be it's going to take discipline either way. Yeah. Either you're going to rent and save what you can so that you could potentially buy here if you see that, but the time is not right for you. You've got some planning and some stuff to execute to be ready to buy, or you figure out a way to buy now, and then the discipline is within doing that and starting to plant that little fruit tree and watch it grow. The decision is sort of the same. It's just disciplined saving or disciplined in, I took the risk, I know what I need to do, let's watch it grow.
Or disciplined in, I retire and I got to work again because I didn't make any investments along the way.
Right.
That's a different kind of discipline.
Yeah.
I got to work till I'm 60, 65 now, not by choice. By force. Thank you guys. Go to coreteamhawaii.com. Former active duty. Probably going to still be able to retire my reserve career. Military spouse, finishing up their career. We understand the process, the decisions, the TLA, the PCS, the Diddy moves, all this stuff. Hit us up. All right.
Come on.